Hello again. Anybody who has dealings with black people, either in educational settings such as schools, colleges and universities, or in the workplace, will be well aware of the fact that punctuality tends to be less strictly observed than is routinely the case with those belonging to other ethnicities. This habitual lateness is not caused because some people are too poor to be able to afford a wristwatch. It is rather a deliberate strategy, a way of demonstrating power over or disregard of the ordinary conventions of life in Western society. It is, in short, intentional discourtesy. This is quite a weird idea, and white liberals are keen to excuse it. Explanations offered for this inability to arrive anywhere on time sometimes involve colonialism and, needless to say, slavery. The idea being that in the days of slavery, black people were obliged to get up to labour in the fields at the crack of dawn under the threat of violence from white overseers. The tardiness we see now is a reaction to this, a subconscious rejection of white power and timekeeping. Then too, turning up on time for work or classes has been defined as an aspect of white supremacism. In the description to this video, I give a link to a piece from the Stanford Social Innovation Review, which expounds this theory. It is one which has become very popular as a way of excusing black lateness. The article is headed as follows: The bias of professionalism. Standards professionalism has become coded language for white favoritism in workplace practices that more often than not privilege the values of white and Western employees and leave behind people of colour. We are told of the narrative of white supremacy that underpins professionalism today, playing out in the hiring, firing and day-to-day management of workplaces around the world. Under the heading Timelines, we learn that, where are we now? How people manage their time in relation to work plays a huge role in their success. Research from a 2017 Career Builder survey in the United States, for example, found that 41% of all employees are terminated due to continual lateness to work. In other words, turn up on time for work or you're likely to be sacked. Most of us probably already knew this, and we don't need to read an academic journal to discover that if we don't turn up on time for work every day, we're liable to get the heave-ho. Then there's an absolutely classic piece of prose which gave me enormous pleasure to read. Within black and immigrant communities, there is often a deep ancestral connection to polychronic cultural orientation. Some people of colour push against this by adopting a monochronic orientation, but many hold on to their polychronic work style. As a result, they may lose their jobs more often in a culture biased against their norms. Polychronic does mean many different ways of time. Monochronic means everyone keeping to the same time. You see how it is. If a black guy keeps arriving late in the morning or takes longer than other people for lunch, it's because he has a deep ancestral connection to polychronic cultural orientation. That should help his fellow workers get less irritated with him for goofing off so often. I'm guessing that I'm likely to be accused, as usual, of racism at this point. Am I saying that all black people turn up late all the time? No, I'm not at all. Some black people don't turn up late and they are very punctual, and they're the ones that are likely to get on and get promoted and do well, whether at school or work. But an awful lot of black people make a thing of lateness. It is a way of drawing attention to themselves and making them different from everybody else. They joke among each other about this. If somebody of Caribbean heritage is making an appointment with a friend whom he particularly wants to be on time, he will say something like, "That's 8 GMT, not BPT." BPT stands for Black People's Time, and it's an expression devised not by white supremacists, but by Caribbeans themselves. Africans in Britain have a similar way of jokingly referring to the matter. They talk of African time, or sometimes Lagos time. The effects of this can be long-lasting and wholly injurious to the interests of black people themselves. Black pupils arriving late for lessons in some schools is such a common occurrence that it's hardly remarked upon. They roll in 10 minutes after the lesson has started, missing teaching time and disrupting the lesson for all those who were there on time. Because they don't arrive quietly and just slip in and apologise, they make a big production of talking and laughing as they enter the room. Any rebuke will be met with baleful looks and sucking of teeth. I have an idea that this might have a bearing on academic underachievement among black students in Britain and the United States. The practice, if continued in the workplace, will hardly recommend an employee for promotion and can indeed lead to dismissal. None of what I have said here is intended to suggest that this apparent inability to be punctual is some inherent characteristic of black people of African heritage. It is not. It represents a rejection of white European values, and it's entirely cultural. It is indicative of a desire to rebel against a majority culture and demonstrate independence from the mores of Europe and Northern America. Unfortunately, the only people likely to be adversely affected by such behaviour are black people themselves.